The joys of boating, and a lot of times it starts early. For most of us, we wind up towing that boat down to the ramp and having to get it launched, which means the fun of boating begins well before we get into the water, or before we get on the water at least. Welcome back, crew, to this episode of Boneheaded Boaters of the Week.
Going anywhere.
We have mats.
He's on like a mat. Yeah. No, his trailer tires are buried.
Now, of course, we all know boating can be a very fun hobby, but one part of boating that many people do not find fun is going to be getting that vessel launched and the stresses that come along with it. Boat ramps can be a very stressful spot. I mean, so much so that some people decide not to even use the ramp and they'll create their own ramp just to avoid the stresses of going down to one. Now, this is one of the first decisions you're going to have to make once you decide to go leap headfirst into that boating lifestyle, and that decision is going to be whether you're going to be a tow and drop guy or you're going to wind up being one of those marina rats. Now, they both have their ups and downs. Me personally, I have done both and actually enjoy both for what they are. Marinas are fantastic, and I did find that when I kept my boat in a marina all the time, I actually did use it a little more, just because of the convenience of being able to go down there, just launch it and go. Now, depending on your marina situation, there can be some disadvantages as well. For example, my marina was a dry stack, which meant if I wanted to go late in the evening and I didn't call my boat out, well, I was just stuck. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a better version of stuck than this guy's experiencing down here at his version of a boat ramp, but still, it did kind of stink to not be able to use my boat whenever I wanted to. Now, I know some of you were already in the comments like, BG, why didn't you just get a wet slip? Well, because wet slips have some disadvantages as well. One, they typically require some sort of bottom protection on the bottom of your vessel, which actually can reduce the resale value of your boat. Now, don't get me wrong, sure, there's some people who use the boat ramp that still probably need some sort of bottom protection on their vessel as well, kind of like this crew, but it's one of those headaches that many boaters don't want to deal with. Even in freshwater lakes, if you put your vessel in with no bottom protection at all, you're likely still going to get some sort of growth on the bottom of the boat and have to pull it out every couple of weeks and clean it. Another disadvantage of a wet slip as well, I found, was the boat just seemed to get dirtier faster. For whatever reason, boats, like vehicles, don't really like water all that much. I know that kind of sounds like a little bit of an oxymoron, but the reality is when you leave your boat on the water, the higher humidity levels around the water tend to take a toll on the interior a whole lot more than when the boat was just left in the dry stack or left on the trailer. Often I found when I left my boat in the water for extended periods of time, I would come back and find mold and mildew on the cushions a whole lot more often than I would find when I kept the boat stored dry. Now, that's not to say you can't have water issues with your vessel or vehicle when you decide you're going to go ahead and tow down to the boat ramp, because as we can see in these images, that's completely possible as well. Now, I will admit though, even with all the downfalls of keeping your boat in a wet slip, it's still probably for many people one of the greatest options and one of the options where you will use your boat the most. I have done all three and can tell you for sure, when my boat was kept in a wet slip, I used it way more than any other option that we've talked about so far. Now, what might surprise you though, is the second option I used the most was the dry stack, because the dry stack and keeping the boat on the water opens up some options for very short notice trips. So for example, if you decide last second you just want to go have dinner out on the water with your family and wife, well, it's easy enough if the boat's already in the water as compared to when you've got to go pick it up, drop it off at a boat ramp, get it launched, and retrieve it, get everything put back away, and then pray that nothing like this goes wrong while you're trying to do that as well. It just sounded like more of a headache than it's worth on the short trips. Even the dry stack, even though I had to call the boat out before 5, all I ever did is if by 4 o'clock I even had the slightest inkling I might want to go out that night, I would just call, have them launch the boat. Worst case scenario, I didn't go anywhere. They rinsed it off in the morning and put it back away. By now, I already know what you're thinking. You guys are like, BG, why would anybody want to go through the headaches we're seeing on this screen if they can just keep their boat in a marina? And the number one reason typically is going to be cost. It is typically fairly expensive to keep your boat at a marina on the water or in a dry stack facility. Most people have spent a lot of money on their vessel already, and the last thing they want to do is drop another large sum of cash just to keep the boat somewhere near the water. And one other restriction to keeping your boat on the water is typically you're going to be restricted to that waterway. Many boaters like to go out and explore new waterways. It's one of the fun parts of boating, and one of the reasons many people choose to keep their boats on a trailer and go and drop at the boat ramp versus keeping it on the water. But let me know in the comments which way you choose to go. Thanks for watching, crew. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Boneheaded Boaters of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening out on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here. Just like Carter, Connor Bacher, Ted Brooks, and Orange Resort Delta did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.